started. We thought it would be a great way to cap the human security colloquium by actually talking about how you can apply some of the things you've learned in the field to get jobs, right? What does it mean to be in the global affairs field? What does it mean to actually put yourself out there and seek positions like so many of the people that we brought in are telling you about? So I'm really happy to introduce my colleague and friend, David Kirk. David is the founder and CEO of DCA Ventures, LLC, which owns Fora, a community engagement software that streamlines and incentivizes meaningful community engagement. Vend, a mobile app helping couples and groups shop better together. Your CTO, which provides software development services to non-technical entrepreneurs. He's also an advisor to the Alacen Group, a consultancy that helps organizations and corporations with projects related to international development, humanitarian issues, social impact, and sustainability. And he's a contributing editor to Metro UN, a bi-weekly publication on issues related to the United Nations. He previously co-founded Applyify, which helps startup companies in India raise investment funding. Prior to founding DCA Ventures, David conceptualized and created and served as executive producer of a reality TV show in India and Pakistan that featured young entrepreneurs pitching a cross-border panel of investors, securing media partnerships with India's largest English language business network and Pakistan's largest cable television network. From 2009 to 2014, David worked in foreign policy and was named the youngest program director in the 50-plus year history of the Atlantic Council, a leading think tank based in Washington, D.C. In that role, he built a dynamic Young Leaders program from the ground up, raising over $3 million in seed funding from government, foundation, corporate, and individual donors, and conceptualizing and launching large-scale initiatives with strategic partners, including the State Department, the European Union, NATO, the Robert Bosch Stiftung, the Alliance Foundation of North America, and many others. Prior to joining the council, David worked as communications director on multiple political campaigns, including the Defenders of Wildlife Action Fund, where he managed successful statewide issue advocacy campaigns that generated over 200 earned media stories in the battleground states of Colorado and New Mexico. His last campaign position was with the 2008 Presidential Inaugural Committee, which managed the first inauguration of President Barack Obama. David holds an MA in International Studies and Diplomacy from the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies, and a BA from Franklin University in Switzerland. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's always very awkward to hear your own biography, but thank you for the introduction, Natalie. So I'm here. I'm happy to speak on whatever is of most interest to you all, but what I thought might be useful is, given that most of you, it sounds like, are finishing up graduate studies, to talk a little bit about how to conceptualize and execute an effective career search. If that's not of interest, let me know. We can talk about, I can complain about Trump or something for a while. I've been very fortunate to have very useful advice from people, professionals in the executive search industry, who really taught me that the way to think about and execute this kind of a search is actually a bit more of a science than I had thought. And so what I'll be doing is basically just passing on their information to you all. What I thought might be helpful to start would be if I could just see a show of hands of how many of you have less than 2 years professional work, full-time work experience. Okay, and more than 2 years of experience. Okay, so mixed crowd. And of those with more, are we talking under 5 years? Around, yeah, around there. Okay, so we're all sort of in the sort of entry to mid-level career search. Great. Now some of this, well, let me do another show of hands. How many of you all will be looking for work in the United States? Okay, and okay, that's good. And so I guess the rest will be elsewhere. Okay, so feel free to interrupt me. I tend to go on and on because I like the sound of my own voice. But what I thought would be useful is to break this into sort of two separate themes here. And I think that a lot of people, so when I was working in foreign policy, I was running a program that was designed to help recruit and cultivate emerging leaders in foreign policy. So we were effectively kind of a service to help people from around the world further advance their careers in international affairs. And by doing that, I ended up interacting with thousands and thousands of people, seeing thousands of resumes, and learning a lot about different fields in the broader global context, from international organizations to private sector to government experience, NGO, think tank, all that kind of thing. What I was often struck by is that a lot of people have misconceptions about the real world of the job world as such. And that's a natural thing, because you don't inherently understand, oh, this is what an entry-level person does at a think tank. And I think, to be honest, I think a lot of schools do a poor job of teaching people about the real world. I think there's a lot of emphasis on how do you write a resume, what do you put in a cover letter, and a lot less emphasis on what kind of position would be good for you and why. And to give you a quick example, I sit in Washington, D.C. All the time. I hear people come and tell me, oh, I want to work in Congress. I say, okay, why? Well, because I want to write legislation and write new laws. I say, okay, well, how would you be doing that? This would be a recent graduate, for example. What do you think you'd be doing if you got a job in Congress? Well, I'd be writing laws. And I say, well, actually, there's 4 steps before that, right? The first step in working in congressional office is basically answering the door. You have people coming in all the time, so it's being a receptionist. The second step is giving people tours of the Capitol. When constituents come in, you give them tours of the Capitol. Third step is literally opening mail that you receive from voters and writing responses to those letters. Then fourth step, if you make it up those 3 steps, which, by the way, there's no pay increase really between those 3 steps, then you might start contributing legislation. The point is, not that those are bad jobs, but they're very much different sort of jobs than writing a law. And for somebody who's naturally inclined to be sort of a policy wonk and to really want to focus on big, broad issues, who may be introverted, sitting at a desk talking to constituents, many of whom are quite crazy. Anyone can walk into the Congress and talk, may be actually a nightmare job. And if it's a nightmare job, because it doesn't match sort of my personal makeup, I'm likely to not be happy there, and I'm likely to not do well. So this is the first thing I want to talk about, is basically self-awareness. And I think this applies to anybody across the board, regardless of what you want to do. If you want to be a chef, if you want to be a musician, doesn't matter. Knowing yourself is extremely important. And a lot of people neglect to think about this when they start entering a job search. And instead, for understandable reasons, right, they've been conditioned to think, well, I want to work for the UN, or I want to be a journalist, or I want to do this or that. You're never told to stop and think about why, and how does that match your skills and your interests and your sort of your essence as such. So what I would advise all of you to do is, when you start thinking about your job search, to literally sit down and be as self-critical as possible. And this is very much like a self-help kind of thing, which you'll feel stupid doing this, and I felt stupid doing this, but I do this every few years to sort of check in, is to think about, okay, what am I actually really good at, and what am I actually really bad at? Primarily in a professional setting, right? So to give you my list, for example, I tend to have creative ideas and think outside of the box. I'm a good writer, and I can write quickly. I am good at networking with people and selling ideas to others. What am I bad at? I'm really disorganized. I almost missed my train this morning. I get really bored really quickly, and so I prefer to have like a million things happening. And once you listen to the bio, I mean, the stupidest thing I could possibly do is start a business with 5 businesses in it. But I'm doing it, and I may fail, but that's the only way I can think of operating. I prefer, so my attention to detail is not great. My follow through is not always great, because I get bored and I move on to the next big shiny thing, right? So when you think about so when you think about these sort of strengths and weaknesses, right? How does that translate to real life? right? Let me go through that, but let me add one other sort of section here for your list. So you think of, in a professional context, what am I good, what am I bad at, everything, and you all have, some of you have limited professional experience. This is something you learn more and more about as you have more jobs, and you learn, hey, I really like managing people, or I hate managing people, right? I really like writing, I really hate writing. These are the kinds of sort of real world skills. I like coordinating events. I mean, one thing I learned is I was good at fundraising, and I liked it. I never in a million years would have thought that. So the other thing that you want to think about is what's the atmosphere that you do the best in? Just generally speaking, right? Do you like to be in a fast-paced environment? Do you like to interact with people as a big part of your day? Or would you really rather be in sort of a quiet room, sitting, thinking, working on a long-term project? These have real implications for what you're going to like as a career. And to give you one example, I really need sort of human interaction, and my best days are when I'm on the phone or in meetings all day and not sitting at my computer writing something. I was once offered a job that, this was years ago, this would have been making twice as much money as I'd ever made before. I'd have had a title of executive director. I had no business having that sort of a title. And I could have gotten a swanky apartment, a huge TV, a new car, and walked around calling myself a director. And I sort of the only reason I got, this is running a nonprofit in the sustainable housing industry. I had absolutely no experience in that. But I'm pretty sure actually the only reason I got the job is because I made an effective joke in the interview. They asked, do you have any experience in the housing industry? And I said, well, no, but I've lived in houses my entire life. And they all laughed and offered me a job. And I was like, my God, if they're going to offer me a job because of that, like, what kind of organization is this? But the real reason I didn't accept the job was that I walked in for 4 times for interviews there. And not once did I see 2 humans outside of the room I was interviewing talk to each other. Everyone looked like they were comatose or sedated or something. It might have actually been a cult, I don't know. But, and I just knew that based on that alone, that had nothing to do with the nature of the job. That was just the atmosphere in which the job existed, that I would wither like a plant without water, because I would be so bored, I wouldn't have anybody to talk to, I wouldn't feel inspired, that I could see myself walking into the office the first day and looking up job listings. And so I turned it down, which was one of the hardest decisions, and I took a job that paid half as much, which was much more attuned to my skills. So it's important to think about what's the atmosphere you thrive in. Now, this could mean that travel's a very, who doesn't like travel, but like travel's a really important thing. I want to lead an international life. If it's possible to have travel or engagement with people from different cultures, that's an atmospheric condition. I like loud, busy. I like constantly tight deadlines, or I prefer to have less restrictions, less sort of pressure on deadlines, and so on. I want to be in a vibrant office environment. I would want to be on my own, walking around. I want to be talking to people. I don't want to be talking to people. Think about these things. It's amazing how much these actually are important when it comes to your own satisfaction in position. So what I would do as you start your entire job search is to first think more about yourself, right? And so make those 2 lists. Make the list of pros and cons of here's what I'm good at, here's what I'm bad at. Make the list of here's the atmosphere that I like, here's the kind of atmosphere that I don't like. And again, as this will change over time, and you may modify this. And then know that list, be aware of that list, and factor into every position that comes across your desk. And go, I think that's actually a much more important factor than what your academic interests are, so on. Now, if you think of, to carry the logic through, and especially early in your career, you're not going to match too many of these things because there's only so many jobs out there, and the reality is that more junior level jobs are often the work that is not necessarily as exciting and that just needs to be done, and somebody has to do it, and young people will get taken advantage of and have to do it. But the key, in my view, is to look at each opportunity through the lens of these lists and think how many of these skills and these atmospheric conditions that are positive to me match with this position, and the more, the better. And if you think of it, taking it through its logical end, if you're in a position where this matches a lot of your skills and the atmosphere you like, well, what's going to happen? You're going to naturally perform better because it's going to come easier to you. If I like interacting with people and it's a sales job, I'm going to be better at sales than my friend who's very introverted and shy. If my job is really cranking numbers and finishing reports on deadline, I'm going to be a lot, my friend who's shy and more introverted, who likes digging into heavy research items, is going to be better at that job than I am because my attention span is not going to follow through. So if it's coming more naturally to me, it's going to be easier, which means I'm under less pressure, which means I'm probably performing better. If I'm performing better, then what's happening? I'm going probably to advance quicker. I'm going to unlock new opportunities for myself, and so on. Same thing with the atmosphere, right? If this job lends itself to my skill sets and it's in an environment that I like. So I'll give you another example, and this is not to go on and on about myself, but that's the only example that I know of personally. I worked on political campaigns for about 4 years. I didn't want to. I wanted to work in foreign affairs. I did an undergraduate degree in international relations. I worked for a while. Then I did a master's degree in international relations because I wanted to get a job in IR. But I couldn't. Those jobs are not easy to get. So I took campaign jobs in the communications realm because I thought, okay, well, this actually matches my skill set pretty well. The campaign, you're talking to people all day. It's voters, and it's often very awkward, right? You're like handing stuff out at the grocery store, you're going to people's doors and they don't want you to go, or you're calling reporters with stuff they don't want to hear. But I thought, hey, why not? I don't mind talking to people. I don't mind a little rejection if people aren't interested in what I'm saying. And the atmosphere was fun. It was very fast paced. There's a different crisis every minute. A lot of young people hanging out. There's a social scene affiliated with it. These are 15-hour days, 7 days a week jobs, but it's fun. It's sort of vibrant. That matched a lot of what I was looking for, and because of that, I enjoyed it. And because of that, I was actually good at it, and I advanced quickly. And that's a particular industry that's ruled by young people. When I was 23 years old, I was managing 50 staff, and probably not very well, but I learned real early how to manage. Now that became a skill that was helpful in other realms, and the communication side actually are what helped me get back into foreign policy when I could. And I'll explain that journey a little bit more. But I can't emphasize enough how important it is to think about why this is a match for you. And what I would do is make these lists, share them with your friends and family. Share with people who are close, who aren't going to sort of bullshit you, and ask them for honest opinions. Do you agree that I'm good at this, that I'm bad at this? Some people may say, you go to your brother or your sister, you're like, listen, you're sensitive. You're very sensitive. You don't believe it, but you're going to have a hard time with somebody who's, pushing back or having really high demands. There's that whole, I don't know, this is an old movie now, but like the whole Devil Wears Prada, is that the movie? That boss experience. I had that boss. My first paid job. It was okay. Like I was okay. Like I could take a lot of the criticism and it didn't bother me too much. But at a certain point it did, and I moved on. But some people just can't hold up to that, and nor should they have to. So ask the people you're close with who will be honest for honest feedback, and just make this list and look at every opportunity with that in mind. Now, okay, great. I know more about myself. What do I do now that's not helping me get a job? The first thing is to think about is I always advocate for casting a wide net, right? If we were meeting one-on-one, I'd ask you all to tell me what's your dream job. If I can snap my fingers and give you a job tomorrow, tell me what it is. And that's always an interesting thing. So ask yourself that question. If we have time, a good fit for you. But in my view, it's very good to have goals and specific. I wanted to be a diplomat since I was 12 years old because I became friends with the son of a diplomat, and his house is amazing. I was like, well, this is not a bad lifestyle at all, is it? What I learned, and I maintained that goal through college. My plan was to sit for the Foreign Service exam and embark on that career. The problem is, when I started doing what's the sort of second part of my talk, which is how to build and execute a professional network, I started talking to diplomats. And I learned some things that turned me off. Namely that there is a tremendous amount of bureaucracy you have to deal with. You can't go do something because on the seat of your pants. And that's the way I operate. Go guns blazing, shoot first and ask questions later. That doesn't fly in diplomacy. I learned that wasn't actually a good fit for me, right? So our assumptions about ourselves are bad, but I wasn't too far off, right? I want to do something sort of global and international minded. And so I think it's very good to have some initial goals and targets, but I also really advocate casting a wide net. And once you've sort of got this list of skills and weaknesses, atmospheric things that you like and don't like, try and match those with actual jobs, and ask other people to do that too. Ask your friends, ask if any of you can find executive search professionals in your network, cultivate your own professional search person. They're the most valuable resources. This is where I got all this information that I'm sharing with you. But so if you go back again, thinking of the list that I made, right? Sort of get bored easily, want to have multiple things going on at once, wants to interact with people, doesn't want to be behind a desk, working on long-term things. Well, in that case, diplomacy probably doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for me, right? Diplomacy is inherently a long-term thing. You don't see results ever, right? Almost ever when you're doing it. Maybe something's going to be better in 100 years, or we prevented something bad from happening that no one knows about. What would be a good job? Sales might be a good job, right? What do you do in sales? You go, you talk to people, you persuade them with ideas. You're kind of on the run. You have a bunch of different client leads, so it's multiply changing. Executive search might be an interesting option. Working in Congress, probably not. I'd be sitting there doing administrative stuff, which is not a strength of mine, so on and so forth. So you can think about like what you'll always be, I think, surprised on a regular basis by what kind of career options actually would fit. And what I would say is if something fits these lists of yours, you're actually prone to quite like it, whether you think so or not. And so let me sort of move on here to, okay, well, what do I do about getting jobs now? I've got all this great awareness. I'm the Buddha of myself and professionally. What the hell do I do next? I think everyone sitting in this room has access to a professional network and probably has no idea about it, right? It's amazing. I think this is definitely an American-centric condition, right? Networking professionally is a feature of society here, but I think this works in other cultures as well. I've used it in other parts of the world, but generally speaking, I think this is useful information. I find that people are remarkably willing to offer you advice and guidance, mentorship to other people. And I would think of it this way: if you got a phone call from somebody from your hometown saying, "Hey," or somebody who went to your middle school, somebody with some loose connection, they're in the same religious organization as you, they're the son of your aunt's friend, somebody's been given your information and calls you and says, I would really like to, I'm interested in this program at Rutgers that you did. Would you be willing to speak with me and tell me what your experience is like? I would bet virtually everyone in the room would say yes. If you wouldn't, fair enough, but kind of rude. And if you're reaching out to somebody you have some small connection with, and you're asking about advice about how to pursue professional track in what they're doing or how they got to where they're going, why would they say no? Some will because they're busy, some will because they're mean, but actually a huge number of people will be willing to give advice, and you'd be very surprised how much time people are willing to commit. If somebody calls me out of the blue with some connection that I know, right? If it's completely a cold call, I'm probably going to ignore it just for time and whatever. But if it's any kind of connection, I'll sit down, I'll look at their resume, I'll sit down with them for an hour, I'll give them advice, and so on. I'll also, if I'm impressed by them, I'll keep an ear out. And when I hear that somebody I know is hiring, I'll say, hey, you should talk to this guy. I will think about new ideas and circle back to them. Now, getting these people, building this network is it's not quick. It takes time, it takes effort, and it's damn embarrassing at times and awkward. It requires reaching out to a lot of people, but also thinking more strategically about who is in my universe. Last time I spoke at Rutgers to an undergraduate class, there were, I asked some people, I asked a student, what's your dream job, where do you want to work? And they mentioned, a place in Newark. And I said, I bet you know somebody who knows somebody who works there. And she said, oh, no, I don't. And somebody in the next row raised their hand and says, my sister works there. Happy to put you in touch. And that's the logic that you want to think of when you're building a network. I had an interview once. Have any of you heard of the International Crisis Group? It's this big consultancy that does, it was like when I was like a recent college graduate, like, oh, this is amazing, like this is exactly the kind of place I want to be. They get hired by big companies to do risk analysis. It's a globe-trotting, exciting kind of career. I had to interview them because a friend of mine walked the CEO's dog. I have no idea how that came up. Probably after some drinks. But it randomly came up that she walked their dog. I said, would you try and introduce me? But yeah, why not? Next time I'm over there, I'll ask. Person said, sure, come on in. We met for a half hour. I didn't get a job there, but I had a connection, right? And I had no tangible or meaningful connection, yet that person was willing to do it. The human logic behind this is if I have some connection to you, I feel an affinity towards you. In spite of, especially nowadays in the world, it's easy to assume all humans are terrible, but there's still some good in us, I think. But the other thing is, if I'm introduced to you by somebody that you know, whether you like them or dislike them, if I'm going out on a limb to say, hey, I'm staking my reputation, I'm introducing this person, will you speak with them? I'm impressed. Well, okay, they're vouching for that person. I'll take this meeting. Now, that person, it's not a big transaction. You may have spoken to somebody for 15 minutes, asked them if they'd be willing to make an introduction to others that they know in the same field, and they may just go ahead and do it. And that's 15 minutes of your time and a little time sort of researching them and so on. And now you've made a connection that's trustworthy that somebody's going to accept on the other end, right? So this is how sort of strategic networking works. What's the worst thing to do? Well, what I hate, even though I like talking to people, I hate those events where you go with business cards and there's 1,000 people and you hand out, hey, I'm this and this is what I'm looking for. There's loads of these events. I used to do a lot of work in India. These events are all over the place in the entrepreneurship space. They're all over the place in the US and job fairs. Stay away from them. Those are a huge waste of time because what they are, in my view, what they are is it's like sardines in a can, right? It's a million job seekers bumping into each other, talking to each other. No one's hiring, right? They're all looking and they're just talking to each other and maybe find a date there, but you're not going to find a job. What does work is being strategic. And I like to use an analogy. This is, again, an old movie. Have any of you seen the movie Spy Game? No? Okay. Random movie. It's a movie where Robert Redford is training Brad Pitt, real dreamboat fest, to become a spy for the CIA. And there's a scene when they're in Vienna, and they're sitting on the roof of a building, and Redford points to this window, and says, I want to see you in that window in 3 minutes. And it's a residential building. And he goes, yeah, right. 2 minutes and 59 seconds. You run. So his task is, how do you get to that window? And then, the next scene they show Brad Pitt drinking, this old lady handing him a cup of coffee, opening that window, looking at it, explaining her thing or whatever. He got in there. Think of that window as a relevant connection that you want to make. If you want to work at the Washington Post, I guarantee you can find an introduction into the Washington Post, whether you know it or not. If you want to work in the United Nations, I guarantee you can find some foot in the door at the United Nations, and that's your challenge. It won't always work, but the objective of networking is building this literal network that can point you and get a foot in the door. Now, why do I want this? So first of all, there was a study that was done, I guess years ago now, but it's still relevant, which showed statistically the least effective way to get a job is to apply for a job. If you're sitting and firing, right, isn't that counterintuitive? If you're sitting there firing off 1,000 resumes every day, you can think, I'm doing a really super productive job search and just nothing's coming my way. I don't know what's going on. That's actually the least effective way to get interviews and to get jobs, statistically speaking. The most effective way by far is internal references, right? I'm working here, a new job opened up, I transferred a new job. Second one is referrals. Employees referred me. Third one is people who walked in and asked for a job. Believe that. Now, this is specific to the tech industry, but I think this logic carries in multiple directions. So, how do I start? How do I build a network? You might think, I don't know anybody. Like, I don't have any friends at the United Nations. I don't have any friends in the place I want to be. First, think about who you do know. Make a list, make a spreadsheet. Think about who you know, where they work, what do my friend's parents do, what about my cousin, how about the minister at my church, what about the guy I played basketball with. Think about who these people are and what they do. And start mapping out, okay, well, I know Natalie worked in journalism for a long time. She's probably got connections at newspapers. If I'm thinking of trying to get a job in a newspaper, she's probably somebody who introduced me to those people. That's step one. You may find there's not much, especially as we're young, our friends are often in the same boat as we are. Okay, what's a second place that's sort of a natural place to look? Alumni network. You're all plugged into the Rutgers Alumni Network, which is massive. Start researching that now. Start doing that work. Look who's in there. I don't know if there's an online database. I don't know if you need to just look at LinkedIn. Start doing the research. I would bet that 40% of Rutgers alumni you reach out to out of the blue will take your call. And I base this on my own experience. I went to a tiny college that had 300 students. We didn't have an alumni network. In fact, when I graduated, I asked for the list of people in DC. There were 7 people. 5 numbers didn't work. 1 person was a waste of time. The other person was somebody who's helped me through my entire career. One of the people taught me how to conduct a job search and started calling me with job offers 5, 6 years later. Now I've known him for 15 years. He's one of my first calls. If I'm looking for something, I help him place people in other jobs. So 1 out of 7, 6 no's and 1 yes, right? But I called my high school had a very active list, and people that happened to mostly be in Washington. And so I emailed 400 people. They had an online database. I just looked up everyone who was maybe sort of relevant, right? And I said earlier, cast a wide net, right? I was interested in sort of international affairs, politics, nonprofits, journalism. And so I looked for anybody in that realm. I'd find their name, I'd research them online a little bit, just kind of confirm, okay, that's the same person, this is what they're doing, made a spreadsheet, and I emailed all 400 and said, hey, I hope you don't mind my contacting this way. I got your information through the alumni community. I've just graduated. I'm attaching. I went to that school in 1999. I'm attaching my resume just to give you an idea of my background. I'm really interested in pursuing a career in journalism. I see you're in that industry, and I was wondering if you might be willing to let me buy you coffee and take 15 minutes of your time to ask you questions about sort of where you got to where you were. They know what you're asking, right? You're asking for help in career, in job search. You're asking for advice on how to do this, what it's really like. One thing not to do when you're doing this is don't say, hey, can you help me get a job? It's surprising number of people will take that approach and start emailing alumni and say, hey, I want you to help me find a job. And there's nothing more off-putting than that. Now, I did this with 400 people. More than 220 returned my email, which I was shocked by. I was like, no way anyone's going to agree to talk to me. And I was very nervous and uncomfortable doing this. But as an email, if I don't get a response, who cares, right? I don't even remember I emailed them. So I had 220 conversations with people about me, right? And it's very critical to be prepared for these conversations. Do not waste people's time. Have questions for them, right? This is a great opportunity to gather information. What is it actually like being a journalist? You may actually learn things talking to 10 journalists that make you think, you know what, that's not for me, actually. I should focus on something else. You may learn, hey, I really want to do that. And guess what, if you spoke to 10 journalists, you realize you really want to do it, you've got 10 journalists you know now that you didn't know before, who are probably, if they've taken time to give you a call, they're probably going to help you more than that. So one is collecting information, but also make sure you have some sort of stock questions ready to go in case sometimes it's just, a person's a little bit awkward or you're not on your A game one day and it's, you kind of forget. Have a few things you can just ask by default. Okay, what's it like working in this field? Or how did you get to where you are? Or would you be willing to offer a little bit of feedback on my resume? Or do you know any websites that list jobs? That's, have some stuff so, in other words, you're never wasting their time entirely, right? These 10 minutes, 15 minutes can often turn into an hour or so. So one, you collect information about the industries you want to, but what you're really doing is you're cultivating connection that's relevant, that's going to be helpful for you. And not in any kind of a predatory way. These people who are often willing to help. If they offer, a lot of people will offer some assistance, but I think it's also very reasonable at the end of these conversations to say, thank you so much, this has been extremely helpful. Would it be okay if I came back to you with any other questions in the future? And I won't waste, I don't want to waste your time or ask for too much. It's also very appropriate to say, would you be willing, are there any other people who work in this industry that you know that you might be willing to make an introduction to? And I would be extremely grateful and promise to be prompt and professional in my replies and never make you look bad. It's amazing how often people will do that. Now, they've met you for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, they don't know you. It is amazing how much that will happen. I got my first job this way. I called these 400 people, these 220 I met. There was one guy who I'd never met in person. I had a phone call with him once. I followed up with him. I kept him, updated from like every 6 months. Here's what's happening with me. Thanks again for all your help. A year after I met him, I got a phone call out of the blue from him saying, "Hey, I hear you're a finalist for this job. Do you want it?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, I'll make a phone call." He knew the person hiring. He called. He'd never met me. We went to the same high school. That's our only connection. He called the person hiring, and I got the job. Now, it wasn't a great job, but it was a job. I'd never met him before. He went out of his way. He came to me. And this is exactly what you want to happen, right? Your ultimate goal should be, and this is the effective way to do job search, not shooting off resumes. That's part of it. You want to shoot some resumes. But your goal should be 1 out of 10 places that I apply, I have somebody on the inside highlighting me or making a phone call on my behalf. Somebody who knows somebody. There's some kind of thing. I'll give you a little context. When I used to hire at the think tank, these are hard jobs to get. Everyone wants to work in international affairs, blah, blah. If I was to hire for a junior position, I would get 1,000 plus resumes. I would stop at 600 or 700. I just couldn't go through more. And they're all quite interesting. People have interesting backgrounds. Every single time somebody I knew, whether I hated them or loved them, would say, "Hey, I hear you're hiring. Take a look at this person. They're really good." I would always look. Why? One, they're putting their reputation a little bit on the line. 2, it makes my life easier. Cool, I got 600 resumes. Like, I don't know who I'm looking at. Like, great. Like, let me flag that in a special pile. That can make the difference between getting a job and not getting a job. And so you want to be on that shortlist pile as often as you can. So I do think there's a way to sort of push these things all together to make that start happening. The last piece of the equation is to be proactive. A lot of people feel timid, aren't like ready to run out and get the job. I'll give you 2 examples of what I mean. I had a friend who his father was this very charismatic guy. We all thought he was a spy or something. He just sat in his garage, and every once in a while you'd see his name in The Economist. And you're like, what? I thought he was like kind of like a vagrant or something. His first job, he unfortunately passed away a few years ago. At his funeral, the person who hired there told the story of how he hired him. And this was like a larger-than-life, like very charismatic character. He said, I showed up one day in my office, and there's this weird guy wearing a bright hat standing in front of it. And he said, how are you doing? My name's Grant Stockdale, and you're going to hire me. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, good morning. Next morning, shows up, he's there, different hat, same line. He does this for weeks. This is a very extreme case. I'm not expecting anybody to do this. But he shows up for weeks, 3 weeks, different hats. The guy's buying a lot of hats. And he's sitting there in the rain and the snow. One day the guy says, damn it, come up. You got 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, he talked him into hiring. He hired him on the spot. He knew his stuff. He was weird. He got in his face. He's proactive. Now, a less ridiculous version of this that was applied to me, I remember I had a friend whose father was very senior staff in the Senate, and I thought, great, he can get me a job. This is awesome. And I called him, and I told him, I'm really interested in working in this. Oh, great, you want to work in Congress? Like, yeah. He's like, awesome. What party are you in? I was like, oh, I'm a Democrat. He's like, okay. There's 235 members of Congress who are Democrats. Print 235 resumes, walk in, and hand one off at every single door. I'm like, what? What about you just getting me a job? Like, that was a much better deal. Then, okay, so I did that. I printed 235 resumes. I walked in. First 30 or 40 were like, yeah, thanks, no. Yeah, I put that here. 41st said, oh, we're looking for an intern. Want to interview? Yeah. Interviewed. I got an internship right there. So I kind of use the analogy of, maybe it's a politically incorrect analogy, but like dating, 40 no's and a yes is a yes, right? I mean, that's the reality. It's a fairly painful thing to do, to be this proactive, but it's effective on multiple layers, and I'll explain that now. So one is, a lot of people, when they're looking and doing their actual searches, you need to search and see where their actual openings. We'll use the aggregators like, Simply Hired, Indeed. There's a new one that's always on the radio. Anyway, these things that aggregate job listings, those miss a lot. They miss a lot of jobs because if I'm a small 10-person NGO, which is very much in the wheelhouse that you all might be interested in working in, I don't know how to get on that. I don't know how to optimize my keyword searches and that sort of thing. So, you have an idea of where you might want to work. The good news is there's thousands of places that do that, no matter what it is you want to do, especially in the New York area, Washington area, London, whatever, major capitals. There's always going to be a lot of things. Make yourself a list. This is, again, like if you're doing a proper job search, this would take 8 hours a day, every day, to start doing all this stuff. Make yourself a list of those 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 organizations you might want to work with, right? Bookmark their employment pages. Check it once a week. It'll take you 5 hours to go through all those once a week. I guarantee you'll find 4 or 5 jobs that are relevant to you every week that you wouldn't catch on the aggregated sites. So that's one way just to find information. But the second thing is, you are interested in these organizations, right? You don't know anybody in them. Part of your goal when you start building a network through alumni and other people you know is to find people who know somebody at them. But what's stopping you from calling them or emailing them or walking to their office? Nothing, except it's awkward. It's super awkward. I'm uncomfortable doing it. This is what I do. I do sales and call people out of the blue. It's very uncomfortable. But remember what I said about that study, right? The third most effective way is show up and ask. Remember about this guy who showed up with weird hats and asked for jobs. Remember about me going through Capitol Hill and the thing. Showing up and asking sometimes works. Doesn't always work, but it often does. And so if you have 1,000 organizations you're interested in, maybe calling those, some will say on job listings, no calls. Fair enough. Don't break their rules. But nothing stopping you from calling the HR department and saying, hey, listen, this is a little out of the blue, but I love what you guys do. I'm a graduate student. I'm looking for opportunities to get involved on a volunteer basis or to learn more about what you look for in job applicants. Is there any chance I could swing by and have coffee for 10 minutes and just learn more about your amazing work, right? Now, another little tip here, when you're talking to people like in your alumni network as well as at these organizations, flattery works. We love being told how brilliant we are and how amazing we are, right? So oh my God, you guys do such great work, like I'm so obsessed with it, but know what they're doing, right? Have something like, I like this initiative you did or this campaign. So it's like not entirely. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten cover letters that have the wrong organization listed. They're like, oh yeah, you really want to work here, huh? I can tell. And same thing when you're talking to somebody, you know, if I call you and say, Natalie, oh my God, you are brilliant, first of all. Like, you are a global leader. I am obsessed with your work. I'm follow your Instagram. Like, you know, I named my cat after you. Would you possibly be willing to give me 10 minutes of your time to tell me how you got so amazing? Yeah. Well, I am pretty good, right? Like, I'm pretty badass. Like, why not? So flyers are a good tip. Anyway, going back to the sort of cold calling. Reach out to these organizations, email them, call them, show up at events if they're doing a little event. Yeah, it's all pretty uncomfortable. But ask, I would like to learn more. Can I have an informational interview? And that's sort of the buzzword to use here in the US context. Can I have an informational interview? Love to hear about that. 1 out of 30, 1 out of 40 will say yes. But you know what? If you call 100, that's 3 yeses where you now have a connection and a chance to make a good impression at a place you want to work at, specifically, that you didn't have before. So what did you lose? You lost some time of those other 97 emails, but you gained 3 contacts. If you get in the door there, make a good impression, they may not be hiring, but you may get a call from them when they are hiring again and say, hey, you might want to apply to this. You could ask them to introduce you to their colleagues in human resources at other organizations or other people they know. Again, people are shockingly willing to just help. They may ask you. Now, the other reason to do this sort of outreach in some capacity, right? To be able to say I've reached out to 500 organizations or 1,000 organizations that I'm interested in, is frankly to be able to say you've done it. Now, why? Why do I care about saying I've done it? Because when you start reaching out to alumni or other people in your networking, this is a very nice point to casually make in a non-boastful way. You don't want to say, well, guess what I've been doing. It's nice to do that because what it shows that you're serious, that you are hungry, you are willing to do what it takes to advance in your career. And what that means is, if I'm meeting you for the first time, I'm like, oh, I know the perfect person to introduce this person to who could be really helpful, but I don't know them. I'm not gonna, and that's an important contact in my life. So I'm not gonna take that leap. I'll think of like, who do I sort of know that might be helpful? And I might, after a first conversation, introduce you to somebody on the 2nd or 3rd tier of my own network, just because if it doesn't go well, whatever. It's not really an issue to me. It reflects really poorly when you introduce somebody, hey, would you give this person advice? And that person doesn't show up, or they don't respond for 3 weeks, or they're rude. That's really bad for the person doing the introducing. So with that in mind, when you don't really know somebody, you're probably going to your less relevant and less helpful contacts. But if I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, hey, you should go to every door on Capitol Hill. And they say, oh yeah, I've done that. I'm like, oh, okay, this person's serious. They're going to follow through. They're hungry. I'm a lot more likely on the spot to introduce you to somebody that's more relevant, just right then and there, for you having shown that. So there's multiple reasons to kind of do that. And the way this all comes together is, right, so you start with nothing. Now you're ready to start your job search. You have a better understanding of what you're looking for personally. You've looked up 1,000 organizations that you might be interested in. You found some things to apply to. You've reached out to 500 alumni. You've talked to, let's say 100. Let's say 1 out of 5 responds. You've spoken to 100 alumni. On average, those alumni are introducing you to 1 person each. So you've actually talked to another 100, right? Of them, 1 in 5 is helpful. So 20 of them sort of stay in this network, right? Your network's now 120 people. Those 20 people introduce you to another 20 people, right? You see how it multiplies. Keep a spreadsheet, right? Make notes about these calls. If they're not helpful, screw them. Delete them. Don't follow up. If they're helpful in any way, like, oh, gave great advice about resume, seemed like they might be willing to make introductions, note that. Follow up with these people. Stay in touch, right? 3 months, 5 months, 6 months down the road, send them a little update. hey, thank you so much for your help. I just wanted to, just follow up. This is what I've been up to. By the way, you're just keeping fresh in their mind, right? And by the way, these contacts, if you do this right, will be with you for your entire career. When you start a business, you're looking for clients, these are the people you're going to call. The first people I'm calling when I start a business are the people I called and spoke to when I was doing my first job search. I've now sent them business. I've brought them the speakers and stuff. This is not a one-way proposition, right? We're creating professional relationships that are going to benefit both of us. So, so you can essentially manufacture a network out of thin air, and your objective is really that one, you want, when you apply as often as possible, you want a potential foot in the door, somebody to help flag your application and get you noticed. Two is what will happen if you do this effectively, you'll actually start hearing about jobs from your network that don't exist yet. And that's the absolute best case scenario in this whole equation, is you get a phone call saying, hey, listen, a good friend of mine is starting a business, he's hiring for good jobs, not listed yet, you should meet with him for coffee. You go, you might get that job before anyone else has had a chance to compete for it. And this will happen. This happened with me. I remember I got a phone call when I was maybe 23. Hey, I want you to go meet with Colin Powell's speechwriter. He's starting a new magazine. You're looking for an assistant. You'd be a good fit. Go have coffee with him. Didn't work out. But that was an opportunity I got that came to me as a 23-year-old. I don't have any real ability or background. Like, I just started building this network, and somebody remembered me, called me, and that happens over and over. So that's the way that I recommend doing a job search. I hope that's useful. I don't know if there's any questions. More than happy to answer.
So David, really quick, in the academy, a lot of times degrees and credentials are sort of these odd golden tickets, or at least that's the myth we perpetuate. And we have a mix of master's and PhD students in here. So I'm curious, how important is credentialing? And also, when it comes to actually getting hired, if you've been in school for X amount of years, or you've jumped from undergrad to grad to further grad to even further grad, how do you actually prep yourself in the marketplace?
That's a good question. I'm a believer that professional experience is infinitely more important than academic credentials. With that said, academic credentials are sometimes needed. I always advise people to work for 3 or 4 years before getting a graduate degree. Now, I know a lot of people don't do that, and if you probably didn't, and that's totally fine. But one of the reasons is that when you get out, if you've gone straight from undergrad to get your graduate degree, now you're hitting the job force, the job market. You're there with people who just finished their undergrad. You don't actually have a big advantage. You're not going to make more money. You may have an easier time getting interviews, but it's not going to fundamentally change that equation for you. And in fact, I would actually, when I was hiring at entry level, I would tend to avoid people with a master's degree without work experience because, and this was pretty unique to my approach, because I saw a lot of people in that role come in with a sense of entitlement. Well, I have a master's degree. I don't need to be doing clerical work. Well, I need clerical work, so that's what someone's doing. And and we actually, at the think tank I worked at, we had like a revolt, like an intern revolt. People like, we're not being utilized well, blah, blah, which was really dumb. And the guy who led it was, he was in this profile. It was so dumb. This is like my first day there, and I was running the internship program at that time. I was like, guys, listen, this is not a fight worth fighting. Somebody asked me to clean the kitchen. That's what this is about. I was like, yeah, I would never ask my intern to clean the kitchen. Somebody did, but I'm with the company. I'm representing the company. This guy leads this big thing and wants to sends a letter to the CEO. I like, dude, listen to me. Let this go. This is not a fight worth fighting. He does it. Guess what happens? Weeks later, the person he worked for quit. That job was opening. That would have been immediately his, but because he's led this revolt, he's not considered, right? So I'm like, dude, pick your battles. But I think on average, if you have a master's and versus somebody who doesn't have a master's for an entry-level job, you'll have more success getting an interview. but it doesn't really change your prospects. You're not going to get more money at all. It's not, it really doesn't make a massive difference. And 2 years down the road, when that person has 2 years of experience, this person has 2 years of experience, I'm not even really looking at the master's degree that much anymore. That said, some jobs require, right? So the job I got at a think tank, I got my master's degree only to get the piece of paper, if I'm being perfectly honest. I had good professional experience. I managed staff. I learned how to get communications, get press coverage. But I couldn't get interviews at international affairs organizations. If you're looking at the international affairs world, it's a very hoity-toity, self-important world. People like credentials. And I'm not, and I don't mean to undermine at all the importance of getting graduate degrees. But there's a lot of pomp and circumstance in that world. And so I went to London to get it. It was a year only. And I got the piece of paper. Because of that, I loved graduate school. I had a great time, made lifelong friends. I didn't learn a single thing that applied to my professional life. I mean, that's the honest. That's not totally true. We did like a module on public speaking. That was really helpful for me. And TV interviewing, which helped a lot when I was doing press work. And I learned loads of interesting stuff about Africa and about international development. I never utilized that in real, obviously like in conversation it was helpful and that sort of thing. But what you do when you're working, when your reputation is on the line, when you have accountability because you're getting paid to do a job, in my view is infinitely more important than what you've learned in school. Academic track, different, right? PhD, going and teaching, that's a totally different ballgame. I don't know anything about it. If you have a master's degree, you have a PhD, you're in a good starting position. But it's still just as important to focus on what do I accomplish, how do I present myself, how do I present these skills, and how do I build an effective job searching mechanism. That's going to be more important than just having the credentials. But just to give you a fair dose of cynicism, as you can guess from my tone, maybe I've overdone a little bit, but you're not defined by a degree, just like you're not defined by one job. You're defined by the collective of what you do, and the key is to think about how do I connect the dots, right, between position and where I want to be. So you want to have a plan. You want to say, okay, look, my dream scenario, you should always have that dream job in mind, right? And that's going to change over time, but I want to be in this kind of a job. How do I get there? So just to walk you through my path a little bit as an example to explain this, I wanted to work in international affairs. I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know what kind of jobs were there. I thought diplomat, policy analyst, which by the way, policy analyst jobs don't exist in the real world. Like there's like 10 of them, and people have 20 years of experience. They're experts. Like you're not getting a policy analyst job out of grad school. I thought I wanted to do that, but I knew, okay, I want to do something international. I tried and tried and tried. I networked. I applied. I couldn't get even interviews at these organizations. I went to this obscure college, Switzerland, no one had heard of. I had no luck. I just couldn't get a job in that field. So I took a job. I took jobs in politics. And why did I do that? It matched my skill sets a little bit. But I also thought, okay, I moved quickly into communications, right? Getting media coverage. And my thought process was, I still want to do that international thing. Every kind of organization needs somebody to talk to the press. They need somebody to help with communications. And so if I acquire these skills, then down the road, it doesn't matter if I got them in politics or in healthcare or wherever it is, if I've been proven track record of getting media coverage, I can find an international organization that needs the same and transfer that way. That's not how it worked. I did make that leap, but it was more just, it wasn't a communication job. But that's, so I would have that mindset and think about how does this transfer this. So when you're coming out, if you have 2 job opportunities, right? Here's sort of a real world case to consider. So let's say your goals, let's say your dream job would be working for like an embassy or something. Like you'd like to work in that somehow. Let's say you get offered an internship, an unpaid internship at Human Rights Defenders, an organization in the same sort of specific field. The other offer you have is a paid entry-level administrative assistant position at the American Heart Association, working on heart health issues. Now, it'd be very logical for one to think, well, obviously human rights defenders then. That's right in the same field as Amnesty. I'm trying to get to Amnesty. I would actually say that's maybe the wrong choice, and this is why. You can do anything you want if you're willing to work for free, right? The things you can do are remarkable. I mean, people are now paying. There's industries, the whole business. People are paying to go work for free overseas, but there's a difference in the level of responsibility one has. I've seen in organization after organization, unpaid interns are asked to do tasks. Think of it this way: a lot of times, interns work for junior staff. A lot of times, junior staff have never managed staff before. And way too often, and this is like a horrible mistake, but way too often, junior staff, when they first have somebody working under them, their reaction is, great, I don't have to do any of the shit I don't want to do anymore. So you do my timesheet. Like, there's nothing less efficient in the world than me asking an assistant to do a timesheet. He didn't work those hours, I did. How's he gonna know? Like, that's so ridiculous, right? Or they're gonna do the spreadsheet. That's a management tip for you. You start managing staff is always explain the context of the work that's painful. If we're writing envelopes and stuffing them and mailing 1,000 things, tell them why that's happening. Because if one person answers that and gives us a check, it's paying for this desk. Sit there with them for part of it and do it with them. Stay there late with them if they're going to be late. But anyway, what am I talking about?
Okay, can you talk about the first person you hired at the council?
Which,
The knives.
what's that? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, wait. I think I vaguely remember the point I was trying to make, which is basically the American Heart Association, that thing. A lot of interns, you'll do work, they'll say, give us press clippings, right? Do a breakdown of the news and send us summaries. No one ever reads that. They're trying to come up with something for you to do because they don't know how to manage, right? Whereas if I'm paying a staff, they're doing things that have to happen. This event needs to happen. Somebody has to set the chairs up. Somebody has to put the food out. Somebody has to call the vendor and get the coffee here. Those are actually more highly accountable jobs, even though they seem less tied to substance. But there's no policy debate if the room's not set up, right? And so the job of the American Health Association, yeah, it's not the same industry, and you don't want to work in healthcare necessarily. You might find you love it, but my recommendation would be take that job with in mind that I'm going to learn how to do this stuff, like these events and schedules and hosting travel and that sort of thing, and then try and get into like an Amnesty, doing that, and then grow with it. Sorry, the first guy I hired, the reason I hired, he did not have a master's degree. He didn't have a ton of work experience, but his last job had been selling knives and door to door, and he had an 80% closing rate. Perfect. Now this is a huge outlier in the sort of foreign policy world. My colleagues would have passed him up. But I thought what we're doing is we're selling ideas. We were trying to raise money for our programs. We're selling ideas and we need to figure out creative ways to find the right people to sell to and to sell to them. And so I thought that was good. I always look for retail experience. If you have retail experience, if you've worked at a fast food restaurant, if you worked at a clothing store, put that on your resume. That's unique. A lot of places are not going to look at that. A lot of these think tanks and foreign policy organizations are very elitist. They're going to think, I have to have a Harvard PhD or whatever to get in the door. They're wrong, and they're going to hire bad staff, right? Like, play up those roles and think about how that relates. If you manage a store, if you manage an Abercrombie and Fitch at the mall, you've taken on more responsibility than any junior level staff at a think tank. You got money being counted every day. You're in trouble if that's not in there. You're dealing with crazy people walking into your thing. You're dealing with people trying to steal from you. That is much more relevant. I'll look for that every day over, this person has a counsel on foreign relations. So think about what you've done and how to present it. Use the networking and get those kind of interviews. Have little stories like that to tell. If you have some unique experience like that, bring it up as a differentiator. A lot of people won't go for that, but they'll make mistakes. And I've been, I remember jointly interviewing a young woman for an internship years ago with a colleague who was clearly managing staff for the first time. This girl had really impressive credentials. I could tell in 2 minutes she didn't want this job. I was out. You know, and I told her, I was like, she doesn't want this, like I wouldn't hire her. And she's like, what? She got amazing things. She sort of looks like me, like she's gonna be a mini-me, da-da-da-da. She took the job and quit a week later, leaving the person out of the blue, right? So like, you know, you want to show that you have the right combination of things. And this, actually I know I'm rambling here, but one more concrete way to tie this into the actual real world is when people put out a job posting, they're literally telling you exactly what they want to hear back. Responding to a job ad is the process of regurgitating what they've asked for back at them, using even the same exact words. And incidentally, if you ever get in the nonprofit world, this is exactly how grant writing works as well. You know, if the U.S. government says we want to fund something that does X, Y, Z, the proposal says, hey, we're going to do X, Y, Z, exactly. No creativity, no nothing. If I'm hiring and I say I need somebody who's going to keep my schedule, who's going to arrange travel, who's going to manage, manage events, I've just told you exactly what I want. I'll get hundreds of resumes saying, and cover letters saying, I wrote a 3,000-page dissertation about, you know, the Treaty of Worms. I don't care. I mean, I do care. That's kind of interesting, but that doesn't relate to running conferences and travel programs that I'm running. Great, you know, Treaty of Worms is awesome. We can talk about that sometime over lunch. But it's also showing that you've missed a fundamental part of the process. A resume is essentially a test as to how well you can concisely summarize and communicate information. And a resume and cover letter should spit back what they've asked for, even to the point where, like, so if I say, okay, I need event planning, somebody to help with scheduling and travel arrangements, what your cover letter should say, and I don't think you need to do like a separate cover letter for everybody, you should have 1 or 2 paragraphs that are customizable. The customizable part should say, you know, I have experience doing travel logistics, event management, and administrative support. Here's what that was. When I was at this place, I did this. When I was at that place, I did, you know, 300 flights for this conference. Forget about your Treaty of Worms edict. That's what they want to hear. That's what you want to tell them. If you have, just the last thing, if you have some like unique experience where I did travel arrangement, but because I'm an active volunteer in my community and organized an event that's maybe not in a job, tell them that. Or if I managed budget because I managed a retail store or a restaurant, McDonald's, and I managed $40,000 in cash. If I saw that, I'd be like, hell yeah, like that is responsibility. So you can tie these into what people are asking. Sorry, go ahead.
How much of your cover letter is actually saying what's in your resume? Because what's the difference there? I mean, obviously you're expanding a little bit. Would you go over the things that are in your resume?
No, good question. No, I would not. It's not a repeat of your resume. Your resume should speak for itself and give me a clear idea of here's what they've done. I'm recommending having a couple of versions of resume, one that's like maybe more administrative focused and one that's more research focused for different jobs, kind of jobs. With the cover letter, that's your chance to make a case, right? That's the chance, at least the way I work is I'll pull resumes I'm interested in first. I'll spend less than 30 seconds on a resume and look through them. And this is a reason why your resume should be short and sweet. But if something catches my attention, I pull it aside, then I read the cover letter. The cover letter is your chance to make the case for why you're good for this job. So a couple of tips, and I'm trying to remember sort of the actual format I would use, but I would start by mentioning the organization and how much I'm interested in the job. You know, like I said, I would get all these letters that are like, you know, I can't, you know, the idea of working for the Council on Foreign Relations has always been a goal of mine. I'm like, well, that's great, but I'm at the Atlantic Council, not the Council on Foreign Relations. You didn't even think about this, you're out, right? So I would express that you want the job, show that you're interested, and show an example. You know, and then you want to list what they're asking for and why you have that, right? So this is the experience I have, and then you go into more detail about your resume. And then you're highlighting some things in your resume. So it's like, okay, conference event management experience. Say, you know, I think I would be a great fit for this position because I have a lot. I've had the good fortune of having quite a bit of experience in event management. When I was at Rutgers, I helped us coordinate a symposium. In this role, I managed a budget. I did travel arrangements. I did catering arrangements, and so on. Also, in my extracurricular time or whatever, I managed a church travel trip, or I managed a community breakfast, or whatever. Maybe there's another job you've had where you've done that, and then you build that in. Then talk more about yourself, and then talk about why you think you're, a good fit, and ask for the job. Say I would, it would be an honor to work here. I believe I'm a good fit, and I would be more than happy to provide you with more information. So, but you're making the case for yourself. But most of that you can plug in. Basically, I would customize a bit about why you're specifically suited to what they're asking for and what the experience to back that up is, and then why you're interested in them. Yes.
Do the guys of Empire also check social media? So like the shortlist candidates, do they check that?
Yeah, I've heard of some people getting rejected because of that.
Yeah.
I would use common sense. Like, don't have a picture of you,
So we have to have like
doing drugs.
do you think like it's probably I would like have two Facebook accounts, like one is like for the residents, one is for the employee.
I think it's pretty easy to find somebody if you want to. I would just make your settings private, right? Like the number of people I've seen, particularly in the millennial generation, who don't have any privacy set up, and it's like great. Like your profile picture, or like the second picture, is you like passed out on a beach with like a bottle of tequila next to you, which sounds like it was fun. We've all done it, but I may bring in your judgment. So I would just honestly, I would set your privacy so that only friends of friends or somebody can see your stuff, and not worry about it. I just wouldn't leave it open. And I would I never really looked online. Maybe I should have. Probably could have avoided a couple situations, but think about your online footprint a little bit. Think about what's out there. Everything that's out there is sticking around. So, in this context, it's more about just looking sort of professional and responsible, but also if you're engaging in very, very pointed policy discussions in a public Facebook group, that might find you. And I'll give you an example. I interned way back when at a very sort of left-wing Israeli organization that was advocating for reconciliation with the Arab-Israeli peace process. That organization was controversial. And when I started looking for jobs, I decided to ultimately take that off my resume because people would preemptively form judgments about where I stood and brand me as a radical. No, I believe in free speech, and I could have kept it on there, but I believe more in getting a paycheck, right? So, if you're on, I remember I was recruiting somebody for an event, and an Egyptian guy, and look at his Facebook page, and he was posting lots and lots of stuff praising Osama bin Laden. Everyone's entitled to their own, but that's not going to get you into a program I'm doing with NATO. It's just not, And so, I'd be careful about taking very strong public things. If you're passionate about it and want to, do it. Awesome. But just understand that that sort of thing may come around. You may, if somebody's Googling you, you may show up as having gone to this event or that event. I don't think this stuff should matter per se, but it's up to, at least in the U.S., it's up to everybody's own discretion. Look at what's happening in the NFL. People are taking a legitimate protest stance, and it's within the rights of the private businesses that are teams to deny them employment because of that. Do I agree with that? Hell no. But is it the company's rights? Absolutely. That's it. So I'd just be careful with what you're throwing out there. Yes.
I think so I'm starting to apply for jobs, and I've never really applied for anything before, so this is really new. But one of the biggest pieces of advice that I get is to apply for things that you don't feel maybe all the way qualified for. And I just kind of want to hear what you think about that, because I personally I don't feel qualified for much. Right, I went from undergrad to my master's, and I've had internships or whatever, but I don't know what I qualify for. So what are your thoughts on kind of putting yourself out there?
Well, I think you should get 2 more degrees first. It should only be like 200 grand. No, so, yeah, there's no, I mean, you don't lose anything by
Right.
shooting high. I would correct you and say that you do have experience. You need to better learn how to present that and make a case. And particularly, so when you're in your scenario, maybe you don't have that much like full-time work experience. So first of all, in this whole industry of like global affairs or whatever, there's a catch-22, right? This is an entry-level position, but we want 2 years of experience at the UN. What? Like, then it's not entry-level, right? Now, the best way to bypass that is to get a recommendation from somebody who knows somebody in the place that's hiring, and they'll take a chance. That is the best way to bypass that, and that's the best way to get any job. And that's why the whole networking thing is important. But think about, the other things I would say is, I think there's, for some hiring managers at least, there's a bit of a novelty factor that you can use to your advantage. What's a little unique about your story? And this is really what the one piece of substance beyond the sort of regurgitating talking points that I would recommend for your cover letter. What's a little different? I swear, the only reason I ever got interviews from applying the first year out of college was that they'd be going through in Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Penn, blah, 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 blah. Switzerland, what the hell is that? Well, let's call them in for a break. I want to hear what that school was. Novelty factor, get a chance to go explain that. Now, what do I explain that was unique to that piece of my life on a cover letter and then an interview that helped stand out? Well, I went to college, I was only 300 students, but from 75 countries. My roommates were from Pakistan, from Italy, from Mexico, from Ireland, from all over the world. I learned how to curse in 40 languages. But there were a couple of scenarios. One is I live in this very international environment. You have a very diverse program here, as Ali's been told me about. That's truly unique. And the specific example I would actually give in my cover letter was that I'm from Washington, D.C. I was at this school in September 11th, and I was with people from about 20 different countries when that attack happened. I had other students on campus celebrating the attack. I had friends who lost family members in the attack, and I had, for the most part, this very global group of people showing empathy and concern, knowing that my family was in the U.S. or whatever. Now, was it fun seeing people celebrating on campus? No. Was it realistic? Absolutely. A lot of the world was celebrating that day. And that's a viewpoint that I would not have seen if I'm sitting at Harvard, right? This big hoity-toity school where you have probably a lot of people from a very similar mindset. This was extremely realistic, right? When Pervez Musharraf took over Pakistan, my roommate's father was arrested. Why? I asked him about it. How was he saved? He was saved through a distant tribal connection on his mother's side, right? I dug into those because I was operating in this global context. I would have just seen that as news running along. The Iraq War invasion happened when I was there. 90% of my colleagues were like, this is the stupidest thing, this is aggression, this is illegal. Whereas if I'm in any school in the US, like, rah, rah, like, we'll put a boot in their ass, right? So, anyway, so the point was that I can make a case that I've been in this very global and intercultural environment, and as a result of that, I look at issues from multiple viewpoints, right? I'm conditioned to think about, well, what would somebody from Malaysia think about this? What would my friends from China think about this? Explore them on a deeper level. Now, I've also learned how to quickly develop a personal rapport with somebody from Malaysia, somebody from China. I can sing a song in Russian. These little things truly help in professional life. So the way that I can present this to employers was to say, look, with me, you'll get somebody who looks at something from every prism. I'm not going to accept the line and the company line necessarily. I'll be a critical thinker, and I'll give you multiple viewpoints. I'm also very adept at making quick connections to people across cultural boundaries. That's super helpful if you're doing a conference where you're going to have people from 100 countries complaining to you about their hotel reservation, for example. to understand, right, well, this is maybe a way to address somebody here, like be more formal, or with this culture I can be a little less formal, make a joke, I don't want to make a joke here, that sort of thing. So I would think about, in order to like make yourself stand out a little bit, what's a little unique? Things that I've seen that are unique, raised by a single mother. I'm an orphan, I overcame cancer. These are things that are real struggles. We all have struggles and challenges we face in our lives. And it's not cheap to mention those in a professional context. If maybe you raised, helped raise a younger sister, maybe you, I don't know, you broke your leg. I mean, these little tales of personal adversity, I think, are compelling, and you can tie them into a professional context, right? So, I don't know why I'm bringing this one up, but just like, if I helped raise my younger brother, for example, because my mother was sick or whatever, well, what does that have to do with a job? It shows you're a responsible person, and you're probably a lot more responsible than somebody who's never had to deal with it. So I think of something. It doesn't have to be like some personal tragedy, right? But maybe you got super excited about something and said, "Hey, I'm going to start a Facebook group about this," and it got 1,000 followers from around the world. That's awesome, right? So think about what can separate you from the pack a little bit. Drive that home in your cover letter. Drive that home in the interview. In your interview, you should always have a story like that ready to go, that you can kick into gear. Even if you're nervous, you can tell it reflectively. Practice it in front of the mirror. It feels stupid doing it. It's a weird thing to do, but practice it so that you can say it if you clam up even. And then, at the same time, network effectively. And if you're interviewing for that job against somebody who has 3 years of experience, but I'm recommending you to Natalie, and the other person no one's recommending, you actually have the leg up. But it's hard to say, it takes work to get to that point.
Thank you, David. So we've come to the end of our session, but David's still going to be here if any of you need help with your resumes or help with the job search strategy. He'll be sitting in the office behind Desiree's room, so you can give him maybe 5 minutes to recover and then you can reach out to him. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for having us.